Welcome, everybody, to The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. I'm Santiago Kneeland, your host, and today we're going to talk about Luke Skywalker. I believe that Luke Skywalker is the main character, the main story. I mean, he's the one that really drives Star Wars. The story of his family, his personal story, and everything really works around the hero's journey of his life. So I'm really happy. I'm really honored to have a very distinguished panel with me today. They are friends of mine, and Margie, who was part of the initial Star Wars craze. So there's a lot of stories that we're going to be unpacking. So first of all, let me introduce, ladies first, Margie Ray. Margie is a 35 years as a research scientist. She has different areas of interest, but her main areas are biochemistry and lipid protein integrations, protein structure, and protein crystal growth in Earth normal and microgravity. Basically, she is all of the biology and sciences. Thanks for being with us, Margie.
I'm glad to be here. We're talking about one of my favorite subjects, and I'm all about that. So this is going to be fun. This will be a lot of fun.
Thanks for being here, Margie. Then we have Ian. Ian is a mechanical engineer, and he has a very scientific mind. He likes to take complicated things and simplify them. So I like his approach to things. He likes to take complicated stuff, break them down, and that gives us a real insights into how things work. And one of the interesting things is that Ian is an aerospace instrumentation engineer. So he works with instruments. That's something that's really crucial in Star Wars, all the technology that we see here. And then we have Alfonso Villa, and I'm really happy to have Alfonso. Alfonso is a dear friend of mine from Mexico. We've known each other, I think, all of our lives. Alfonso is a Star Wars fan and collector since 1981. He has a bachelor's degree in mechanical and electrical engineering and 27 years of experience in automotive industry in both the commercial and operational and executive roles. So he knows all about cars. And he is interested in science, the spirit, and many paths to transcendence. And one of the things that I like about Poncho is that I've been having, discussions with him about Star Wars. I think the deepest discussions I've had of the wisdom in Star Wars are with him. So I'm really happy to have him here because he's fundamental for this part of the podcast. So thank you, Poncho. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invitation, Santiago. Nice to share the stage here with Margie and Ian, and looking forward to the discussion. You know, I love Star Wars and the myth and the Force and the spiritual part behind it. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, we're really excited to have you guys here. So let's get to it. The topic for today is Luke Skywalker, and I want to analyze him in the different facets of his life. I mean, there's the part when he's the hero, then he is also a part when he's a master. Maybe we don't have a lot of information from that story, but he was also a master. And then we also see Luke. And there's a certain thing that he has with the dark side. I mean, he always wears dark, black clothes, and he has a capacity. We see him in The Mandalorian, in that scene when he rescues Baby Yoda, that he has the similar scene, the hallway scene as Darth Vader. And we kind of see those parallelisms. So there's something that in there with Luke Skywalker and the dark side that I want us to talk about. And I also want to discuss the death of Luke Skywalker, which is something I think very symbolic to all the people that were fans of him. You want to see his trajectory and see him die. And also the destruction of the Jedi, the Jedi tree. And it's very interesting because the two people that seal the coffin in the Jedi are really Luke Skywalker and Yoda. I mean, the two grandest teachers of the Jedi are the ones that put the nails in the coffin. And I want to see why. So first of all, Luke the hero. Luke the hero, just to start this off, is a very interesting story. We've seen the buildup of the rebellion against the Empire. We see all this buildup of how they're doing, they're conspiring, and they're, the senators inside, and they're doing all this, and they're really constructing the alliance, the rebel alliance, and they have all this organization and they have all constructed everything. But suddenly, out of the blue, comes Luke Skywalker, and he's the one that gets on the on the X-wing, and he destroys the Death Star, and he's the hero. But where does he come from? There's a story about Anakin, and he was supposed to be, kind of his destiny was supposed to be this hero. So how do we unpack this? How do we understand Luke Skywalker as a hero?
Luke is on a journey, right? He is a farm boy living in a godforsaken planet out on the outer rim of the galaxy, and then suddenly the rebellion comes to him. Basically, these droids happen to land on his planet and are looking for somebody that he knows, somebody from the past who later on we find out that is living there because he's watching over Luke, right? He is preventing his father from finding him and probably destroying him. And the interesting thing for me, I think, is how Luke goes from being a farm boy in Tatooine to being a key person, having a key role in the Rebel Alliance, and of course destroying later on the Death Star, as Santiago mentioned. And this is a journey, a journey of recognition of where he stands, who he is, and what he wants to do. And something within himself is telling him he has to go. He at some point Yoda is saying, never. I've been watching him for a long time. Never his mind on where he was. He always had his mind somewhere else. I think because the planet was maybe too small for him. He had his eyes set on the galaxy and had grandiose ideas probably. But it's really the opportunity that comes to him and it's placed in front of him, and he rejects it. He says, no, I cannot go. I have many things to do here. My uncle told me I can do it after the next season. Then I can go and do whatever I want. And life at some point forces him to take the step because he first has the opportunity to decide. But then it's like a no-brainer because when he goes back to see his family, his aunt and uncle, they are dead. So he doesn't have anything to do there. And Obi-Wan needs him, and he was curious about it, and then he takes the decision consciously and goes forward into becoming the hero that we know. And so that's really the first step into the big world that is in front of him.
No, thank you. I think that's very important, point to what you're saying. There's called the call to adventure that was placed on Luke, and that first he rejects it. There's something that you say he doesn't. I can't take it. But like you said, suddenly his uncle and aunt are dead, and now there's nothing for him but to embrace this. So yes, in a way, destiny was knocking on his door. So he was that. But I think it's very important, and what you're saying, that he had to take that opportunity. If he didn't want to take it, I mean, the story would have ended there, and nothing would have happened.
There would be no Star Wars.
Exactly. Thank you for that contribution, Poncho. Margie, you want to share something?
Yeah, I really appreciate that synopsis, particularly about how to view him. I saw Star Wars on his opening.
Well, tell us, give us that story and tell us your points.
Well, I had just started graduate school, and I was just getting to know my graduate student friends, and everybody thinks people in science are just totally geeks. And everybody I know in science has read a lot of science fiction. They go to every science fiction movie there ever was. I mean, we just like that stuff. Okay. So, the movie was coming out, and I had just barely met a lot of these people, and they all said, we're going to go see Star Wars. I said, oh boy, I'm in, and so we had to stand in line like 2 hours. And we didn't get in the very first showing, which was like, we couldn't get out of the lab in time. We had to go, but we still had to stand in line 2 hours to get into the second one. And we were all talking about it, that we had heard, all this stuff. And so we go into the movie, and we're all sitting there, and there was like we were sitting on 2 rows right behind each other, and it when it started rolling, you could just hear this like collective gasp. I mean, nobody had ever seen the start of a movie like that ever. Okay. And And then, then when the cruiser comes overhead, you know, there were a lot of expletives around me, that were going on that I won't share on this recording. But anyway, we just couldn't, it was just, you felt like that thing was right over your head. It was like the whole place was vibrating, and you could just feel the energy of the people. We were just all so amazed at how it started. We just couldn't, just couldn't fathom what was going to happen. And so, of course, then the movie starts. But for weeks afterwards, when we would like meet up after, everybody go to the Rat to have a beer or whatever, that was a topic of conversation. I mean, it went on for months. People would talk about, did you notice this? And some people had already gone back to see it like 3 and 4 times. By this time, people were going back to see it. I actually saw it again there. And then when I went home for Thanksgiving, I took a bunch of friends to see it. So I saw it like 3 times in the first year, because there was so many little things that you wanted to know and to, understand. And we all knew that it had to turn into something, more. There had to be more. They couldn't stop there. I mean, they just couldn't. It would kill us all. And so that was the way we looked at it. So it was a wonderful experience to have, actually been there at the birth of something that was just so huge, and but to get back to Luke, had been reading a lot of Joseph Campbell, and the hero's journey, and to understand, to really understand that. And then, you go back and you look at like Maslow, when you're looking at archetypes, and Campbell, talks about archetypes, but he also talks about why we need myth. And this is what Star Wars was going to turn into, and did turn into, is the myth for our generation, for baby boomers on. It's the myth that, I mean, Greeks had theirs, and we've carried some of them forward, when we look at Ulysses and all these other things. But this is our myth. Okay, this is the one that we relate to, even though it's set in a time far away, and in our case, it would be far into the future. But he still is. Lucas is still using the archetype. When the potential. Remember, he is a potential hero until he makes a choice, and until then, it's all potential, and there's no actuals yet. But from that choice that was in some cases somewhat forced on him because of the death of his aunt and uncle, he still made it. He could have gone and crawled into a hole, and said, I don't want any part of this.
Mm.
But he didn't. He did what in the hero's journey actually happens. He made a choice. Well, there are young people, and in my generation too. We were making choices every day. I mean, they weren't necessarily going to save a whole cosmos or whatever, but you're making choices that do have, significant consequences. And this is what myth sort of teaches us, is that you may not be the bravest guy around, you may not be the smartest guy around, you may not be, whatever. But there are times that you may have choices that are going to make, real differences in your life, and maybe the people around you. And this is what's so neat. And I'll tell you one really interesting thing. My godson later, who at that time, of course, had not even been born, my godson later became as a little kid. Don't ask me why. He loved Boba Fett. He does. I don't know why, but he did. And but he was avid about I don't know how many times he saw Star Wars. But even as like a 5-year-old, he could quote lines out of, and when we got to where we would say Bear's having a Luke moment, his nickname was Bear. We say he's having a Luke moment, because he's making a decision, a choice. And, it's sort of like has gotten into our whole culture. And, this is the part at the beginning when Luke makes a choice. we can all look back at points in our lives where we made choices that were very significant. Okay. This is just beginning to give you an outline of just how significant our choices can be if you can relate yourself to the myth.
Yeah. No.
And give your and take the you have to realize that you're not necessarily a really courageous person at that time, but you are making a choice.
That's really good, Margie. I think that ties into we can all be heroes. I mean, it's that sometimes we don't realize it and we don't expect it. And some of the things that we've been unpacking on in these podcasts is that we sometimes don't feel we have the dignity. We're not worthy, maybe, but we are, and that's very important. I mean, there's we all have a piece in this puzzle, in this universe. And one of the things, not only of Luke Skywalker, but that I like about Star Wars is that even the most insignificant character, does something that is transcendental, that saves the galaxy. So even if you don't consider yourself important enough, there's maybe that small thing that you're doing that is going to change the world. So never doubt. And there's a phrase they use that about the droids, that never doubt the capacity of a droid or something to change the world or something like that. Because it's interesting, and Poncho and I have a theory about the droids and who as the narrators of the story. But if it wasn't for these two droids, R2 and C3PO, how many times would we have our heroes killed? Just right off the bat in the garbage container. They would have been crushed if it wasn't for them. So everybody has a role to play.
He was getting bored as a farm boy. He knew he had a calling, but he was duty bound to help his aunt and uncle, and he wasn't going to let them down. He was going to fulfill that. But when that was removed, then he followed his destiny. And I kind of identify with that a little bit. I used to be a mechanic. I was a mechanic for 8 years. I went to vocational school to auto tech to be a mechanic, and I thought it was amazing opportunity to do, and I really looked forward to doing it. And I enjoyed it for a while, and then I realized this isn't what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And my big step was going back to college after 8 years of being out of school, and that was terrifying. The idea, I didn't know if I could do it, but I did. So the big step, was taking the first step. That was stepping out and taking the first step was the hardest part, but it's the best thing I ever did. So I understand the reluctance and the fear of making that step, but it was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
The 8 years wasn't wasted, because that was an excellent building foundation for mechanical engineering, learning all of the things about vehicles and the engineering behind it. And I had just a fascination with machines. So it was time well spent, but I recognized it was time to move on.
Yeah, that's interesting point of view. But yeah, I mean I mean, there's sometimes the calling, and you have a duty, like you're saying, and sometimes that duty, sometimes you have to take it, even if there's a duty there, or you have to take the big leap. Now we're gonna talk about Luke Skywalker as the master. We see him as a hero, sort of this guy that takes on the Empire and defeats it. But then we see him as a teacher, and there's a little bit of story there, but we kind of see where it goes. I think that he failed as a teacher, because there's the story with him and Kylo Ren where he sees the potential, and this is very interesting. The potentials and the actuals, and that's something that we talk about a lot. Everything is in potential, but then when you do it, it becomes an actual. And what he saw, what Luke Skywalker saw, was the potential for evil and destruction in Kylo Ren. It wasn't actual, it wasn't doing that. And he tried to prevent it, and he tried to maybe strike him down and kill him before that happened. But he realized that when he was about to do that, that wasn't the actual, it was a potential. That was something that could happen, and it's something we can relate to free will. Why does God give us free will, and why does he permit evil? Because we have free will. I mean, there has to be the possibility for that. So I see that in a way, Kylo Ren, there was a possibility of him to go into the evil side, but Luke was taking that decision away from him. That's we're just talking about the decision. He was robbing him of that decision. So what can you tell me about Luke as a master, as a teacher?
Well, as you say, there's not a lot of information in the movies, no, in the canon movies. For sure, I am positive that there are many books and comics. The whole Star Wars universe has exploded since the 80s, 90s. We don't know exactly what happened, no, but I mean, analyzing from the outside the history of Kylo, and of course being the grandchild of Anakin, yeah, he had also the potential of doing evil, no, as we all do. No, we all have that same capability within ourselves, and it remains a potential, or it remains in containment because we don't let it out. We make conscious decisions of what is right and what is wrong, and what is guided by love and the light, and what is not, what is coming from a dark corner of our being, and what is being driven by fear. No, so as you put it, the potential was there for Kylo Ren to destroy everything, and Luke was robbing him of that decision. You put it pretty well, and that is not up to anyone. No, I think we cannot decide on the lives of anyone else. We cannot decide on the spiritual or evolutionary path of somebody else, because the path is individual. I am sure Luke was thinking that he was going to do right by striking Kylo down, but that's not the Jedi path either. No, that's not loving your brother as you love yourself. So something pulled him out of that. Kylo woke up. Whomever had the feeling first of stopping or waking up, I don't know, but it didn't happen, and they confronted each other, and that was the end of it. No, that was the end of the new Jedi Academy and the new Jedi Order. And of course, Luke felt defeated, and he felt that he had failed. But even though he already destroyed one or two, one Death Star, and he helped his father to, now we know, almost kill the Emperor because he survived, but he had already done so many great feats. He still had to do something else, no? And we'll talk about it later when he passes away, when he transcends. But it was still part of his path, of his personal growth, and it only helped him become an even better master, no? And he realized himself, he fulfilled his calling as a master, let me say, with Rey. He was able to guide Rey, and he was successful then. And once his mission was accomplished, he transcended. No?
Very beautiful, Pancho. Because yes, I think that this is very important. We see Luke as this, he destroyed two Death Stars, or first one, and helped destroy the second one. I mean, he was crucial in this. But then we see him fail, but he does redeems himself. I think this is important. He does redeems himself in Rey, and in the end, it's Rey and Kylo Ren confronting the Emperor. So there was something there, maybe we, like many things in life, we don't see, some bad things are happening to us, but we don't see that these are there because something better is going to happen later on. They're the building blocks for something later. So I like this way that you're framing it.
One of the takeaway messages about when Luke finally, revealed that he had thought that he was going to kill his student, and what the repercussions of that, and that Kylo knew, he realized that his uncle was going to kill him, and that pushed him down a wrong path, and but it also goes to it's to demonstrate that just because the person is a hero doesn't mean that they always make great decisions, and that they within themselves can stay conflicted about things, and that whole part of the last, with about Rey and all of that, it is that when she finds him. Actually, I can tell you, I was out on Michael Skellig the summer they were filming that in Ireland. I was
Nice.
there the week after they did it, and when the movie came out, I went with my little cousins, and they had seen all the pictures of the place where it was. And my little cousin, in the middle of the movie, he jumps up out of his seat and he goes, "That's where you were." And the whole theater just like went, "What's going on?" Anyway, the thing about it is that he was conflicted and he was trying to seek some form of redemption, and he just didn't know, what it was. He was hiding more because he thought he was going to be doing more harm than good. And of course, Layla was hoping that he would, she wanted him to come back. And then of course he did, and he projected himself, back. But the fact, because of the redemption of Kylo with Rey, that combination that redeemed them all. That was really redemption for that whole line of very negative things that happened. In the whole in the story. That part of the story to me was to learn from your fail. You learn from your failures. You gain a lot of wisdom from your failures. There is always the option of redemption, or you could do what Luke did for a long time and stay hidden. Don't make a decision, don't do anything. And not to say that that's what you need to do in your real life, but sometimes you need to step back and just think about what what you did,
Yeah.
what the possibilities were, and all that. But that you eventually have to get off the fence. We were reading in a group the other night about staying. You cannot stay in the dead center of indecision forever. Okay. And so he finally, he got off of that dead center or that depressive episode of all I can do is not wonderful things in the world. So I'm just not going to participate. So this was a lesson. Once again, it's the archetypal lesson where the hero goes off. He does a lot of really good things. He makes mistakes. He learns from his mistakes, and he seeks redemption from whatever he has done. So that was the part of it that I actually took. I loved all the stuff that was shot at Michael Skellig because it's such a beautiful place in the world. And then when I saw the movie, I was like, I am so glad I was there to actually see it, in person. Those things are straight up. I mean, it's exactly like you saw in there, and there are no handrails on anything. They tell you they're about 4 feet.
You can fall down.
Yeah, you can fall down, and 3 or 4 people a year. But I will tell you that they CGI'd the Millennium Falcon out on the helicopter pad because they had to ultimately build a helicopter pad out there because people would fall when they were out there every year and either get hurt, and unfortunately 3 or 4 people would die out there almost every year. But they CGI'd the Millennium Falcon on top of the helicopter.
That's a good insight. That's something that we didn't know.
Yeah. So that's the sort of it's a astonishingly beautiful place.
I can imagine. Well, Ian, what can you say about Luke as the master?
I've learned so many things just listening to you three. I guess the one thing that a point that I would make is you have to pick a side, right? You can't just, I think Marjorie said, you can't just stay in the middle. And that reminds me of a saying that the fence belongs to Lucifer, meaning if you do nothing, then you've already chosen. There's, a Rush song about that too, or a line in a Rush song about if you choose not to decide, you've still made a choice. And that song's Free Will, actually, which is another cool thing. So yeah, that's I guess that's all I've got about that.
It's nice analogy on the fence. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes.
Santiago,
No,
really
it's
nice
good.
analogy.
Yeah, it's in the end you have to decide, and not deciding is a decision. So
Right.
So it's important, and life is like that. How can we relate this story, Luke's story, to our stories? And I think we see that he was a common farm boy that got destiny brought this to him. He had to make choices. It wasn't that it was just okay that I'm gonna just blow the Death Star, and that implied a lot of stuff. And then, like you guys said, he did everything. He fulfilled everything, and suddenly he failed as a master. because of whatnot, and we can unpack them later. We're gonna unpack on the way that Jedi approach things and whatnot. But he failed, and he recognized that failure, and he changed that failure in Ray, like you were saying, Poncho. He redeemed himself there, and then he, like you said, Margie, he was in exile, and he was needed. Even though he felt he wasn't good and that he failed, he was needed, and he was crucial for the resistance to survive. So never underestimate your capacity, and even if you have gone through certain things in your life that you don't feel worthy, or that you maybe are not happy about them, just remember that every day is a new day and you can change. And just as Luke did, you can recapacitate your situation and redeem yourself. So this is really important. Now I want to talk about Luke and the dark side, and I believe that Luke, as you see him, and especially in the Return of the Jedi, he starts wearing all black and his black glove, and then we see him in the Mandalorian when he saves Baby Yoda. He comes in and does the corridor scene like Darth Vader, and he even does the Force choke. I mean, maybe not on a human being, but on a robot, on an android. So I believe that Luke was able to tap into the dark side, to use the dark side, but not let it overcome him. Something that happened with Anakin and anybody that tapped in that. So I wanted to hear your take on this.
As we have said, no, we have good and evil in within, but it's not that we have the quality, we have the potential, and it's our acts that are doing the good or the evil. We are acting, and energy is flowing through us and accomplishing things or making deeds, and they can be good or bad. I mean, like every human, Luke also had that possibility, but then he's also the son of Anakin. And I believe that, and this is my personal belief, that we not only inherit the physical traits or qualities from our parents, no? So I think experience is somehow recorded in our DNA. And up until the moment that we conceive a child, all our experience is already reflected and recorded in that DNA that goes through our sperm and the egg. So Luke and Leia also received that experience of his father becoming a Sith. All his doubts, all his fears, and going back again to when he was going to kill Kylo, he is acting out of his fear, out of the fear that he will become evil, that he will become a Sith, that he will destroy. So we all have that potential, but over his life, he is able to manage that, to control that. He makes maybe the right choices in most of the cases, because everybody can make mistakes. We are all on the path to become better until we become as close to God as possible. So up until then, we are prone to make mistakes, and this is what we are here to learn from our mistakes and to move forward, not to carry our baggage, and that is how we become heroes of our own lives. Accepting who we are, accepting our mistakes, and accepting the challenges that we have in front of them. Ian also mentioned that about going back to university. It's a big challenge. I can imagine going back after several years and then having teenagers as your classmates. So when you decide to move forward and make the right choices, that's part of becoming a hero.
It's really interesting of what you're saying about the potentials, that the potential is always there, the potential to do evil, and the memory, the inherited memory that comes with genetics. I also believe in that way. We're not only inheriting the physical traits, but also all the what happened, the history. Margie, what can you say as a scientist about that?
Exactly.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. What is actually within our, is held within our DNA, because, a lot of how you respond to your environment is through your mental processes, which are, physical reality, very much electrochemical in nature. And we know for a fact that there are certain characteristics that run through families, such as like depression, strange sleep patterns, There's a form of familial narcolepsy that goes through families. Of course, we know there's some horrible genetic diseases that go through, but it's also, if you look at how, people perhaps make decisions or don't make decisions, and you'll hear a parent or a grandparent make notice of a child, and they'll say, they do that just like Uncle so and so, or they do this just like Aunt so, even down to like mannerisms or just like the things that they say or how they how they act. So there is a certain biological basis we sort of are just beginning to really understand, because we're beginning to understand a little bit more about the brain and how it works. And of course, it's through the brain that we experience reality and the physical world around us, and how we react. Some people are always going to run. Some people are always going to stand and fight. And then there's the ones that make the decision, to do either or what. And I think you made a very good point about that. But the thing about when you talk about Luke and his engaging enough with the dark side to do certain things, but he's certainly aware. I mean, let's face it, the emperor tried to was going to kill him if he didn't do it, and so he knew what it was. He had the perfect example of his father, and that if you go down that trail, even though his father, he forgave him, and he, the thing is that here was Darth Vader's like as evil a person as you can be. When Luke found out that he was his father, he never stopped loving him.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a life lesson there about, even though you don't agree with or approve of what another person is doing, it doesn't mean that you have to stop, or should you stop loving them.
Yeah.
God never does. Okay. And so that was one of the, to me, that was like one of the huge, take home things from Luke. So, he's coming from that. He understands the dark side, and then he almost embraces it when he wanted to kill Kylo, and he came very, very close at that point of just, moving in that direction. We all come to the brink at some points in our life of where we're going to make a decision that may really be not beautiful, not necessarily beautiful decision. And we need to look at how he wrestled with that, okay? Because he still, this was his nephew. He still loved him. He loved his sister, okay? So in the end, he when you look at Luke and what he did, it was, I saw in him that it wasn't just the fact that he was rejecting the dark, okay, but he never lost the true light of love. And if we can stay in that place, no matter what, I think that's what it ultimately saved him in the end from doing something really, really bad. But it damaged him to the point that he got so so close to evil that he withdrew. And I mean, I've had times in my life, and I'm sure you may have too, where you felt like you had to just kind of back up and go away, and you needed to like really sort of work these things out for your, for yourself. And he, he did it for him. But we, there are positive ways to do this, and there's negative ways to do it. But, in the end, he redeemed, there was redemption for all. So, but it came out of love, it came.
Yeah. Like you both were saying, it's always love that conquers. That it's always love that transcends. And what you were saying, Margie, that the moment that he understood that Darth Vader was his father, he embraced him. You know, he didn't see him as an antagonist or as his enemy, but he loved him, and eventually that's what really, you know, destroyed the emperor. Well, we see later that he was destroyed another way, but it was Luke changing his father, turning him back to the goodness. So everything is fulfilled.
Mentioned genetics is, I think, the word that we were looking for when it making decisions changes your DNA, which is what you pass on to your children. And that's a thing that people studied and essentially proven it's real. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to point out was we're talking about good and evil, and it reminds me of somebody made the point that you can't be good if you're powerless. You can only be harmless. To be good, you have to be capable of doing evil things, but choose not to. I think it's a good point to remember. You know, if you're harmless, then you can't be good. You have to first have the potential for evil and choose good. That's what makes you good.
A good person is not a naive person. A good person is one that is capable of the most evil, but chooses not to. So
Right.
that's in a way what we were mentioning about the dark side and Luke. You know, that he was capable of that, but he chose not to. So that's important.
Right. Well, and the other thing, when you mentioned that Luke, once he realized Darth Vader was his father, you know, maybe he understood him a little bit more, probably because he understood the darkness in himself and realized that his father, you know, he somehow saw good in his father. He mentioned that a couple times,
Yeah.
that he saw good in his father. And so it was his ability to see that and basically save both of them.
Now we're moving into our final segment, which is Luke's death and the destruction of the Jedi. It gets to a point where Luke states that, you know, the Jedi were wrong and how arrogant of them, you know, to have control of the Force, that, you know, the Sith right below their noses, you know, right in front of them, took over the galaxy, you know, and how arrogant. And then we see that when he's about to burn the Jedi tree, the one that, you know, causes it to burst is Yoda. So it's the two of the most powerful Jedi that destroy the tree. And then we see the final battle where Luke faces Kylo, but he doesn't strike them. He's a hologram. He just is kind of holding him back. And that causes him to, you know, that was his last effort, you know, of energy of just, you know, projecting from one planet to another, and that kills him. And I love this scene because we see the beginning of Luke in the first Star Wars movie. We see the two suns, you know, in Tatooine, and that's, you know, the hallmark of Luke. And then we see in the end where he looks at the distance, and we see those two suns. So we see the beginning and the end of Luke with the same scene of the two suns.
Full circle with the two sons, no? So from birth to death. Yeah, well, it's interesting, the fact that it is the two Jedi that actually destroy that the Jedi tree and all the books and the knowledge that was there. And what you were saying about the arrogance and maybe corruption, well, I think that's the human condition. That's humans running a sort of religion or an organization, at least, that has some principles that were either created or interpreted by humans, and they imprint the human nature into them. When they decide to destroy the tree, to burn it down, well, it's also a sort of transcendence, no? Because it's like in religion, it's not worshiping the image or worshiping the place, or everything is sacred. No, we should be worshiping creation, because that's what's sacred. Everything which is flowing from God into existence is divine. And when they burn that down, they leave that human condition of nostalgia and ownership. They put it to the side, and they understand that the force and the concept of the force, it's beyond any objects that are material and that can be found in this earth or in this world, no? So I think that's a way to bring the whole idea of the force one step further, no? And going into the last battle, you really pointed it out well. It's just a way to delay Kylo Ren from entering the rebel base and going after the heroes, no? And in that way, he puts all of his remaining energy into that act, and then he transcends. Just like Darth Vader didn't really kill Obi-Wan in my eyes.
No, exactly. No.
Obi-Wan just transcended. He became one with the Force, and that's what Luke did. He fulfilled his destiny to what was meant to be in this plane of existence, and he passed on and became one with the Force.
But yes, exactly. It's transcending in both cases, in the Jedi concept and in him as a transcending from this material plane to another plane.
A Jedi going to heaven.
Exactly.
This thing about the transcendence. I mean, we saw it done. Remember, we saw Obi-Wan struck down by violence, basically. Okay, and he transcends. Okay, then we see Yoda dying, basically of old age. He's given his all, and he's lived his life, and his body is now ready to be gone, and so then he transcends. And Luke is more like a sort of somewhat of a savior figure, in that he gives all that he has at the end. He's not going, it's not because necessarily his body or his age is doing it, but he literally is giving his all. And then he transcends. Okay. And it's sort of like when they do away with all of the old Jedi traditions and knowledge and all of those sort of things. It was sort of like it's a dispersal of all that is true, good, and beautiful that they have had out, and so they're doing away with the old remnants that may or probably would hold society or humanity back, or all of the creation. Okay, and so it's sort of like you have to the rigor with which they were holding a lot of these things so close. They got to the point to where they realized that this belonged to the cosmos, and so let's do away with that, and let the Force be out among, which is like, for
free.
me, yeah, free. And for me,
liberation.
The Force is all that is true, all that is good, and all that is beautiful. Okay, and so it was like a pouring out of that, and some religious traditions. One that some of us here share is, that we believe that this is, happened for us, and that all that was true and beautiful and goodness, has been poured out and is here presently working in our lives. So here's another example within the myth that talks about what can happen and has happened for us as we believe it. In reality, humans and all creatures leave this mortal existence in some form or fashion, be it unfortunately by violence or by old age, or just by giving your all, and to your fellows. And so it was, I just, when you look at those three ways and they all transcended, it was just a reminder of things that do happen in our lives, and can happen in our lives. And that just to be aware of them, and realize that truth, beauty, and goodness is around us all the time.
You guys brought up the fact that how they quietly laid their lives down, and there's a great quote that I've remembered and found, and it goes like this: "It is easy to die in a line of physical battle when your courage is strengthened by the presence of your fighting comrades, but it requires a higher, more profound form of human courage and devotion. Calmly and all alone lay down your life for the love of truth enshrined in your mortal heart."
Yeah.
Nice.
Kind of what I envisioned when you guys
Nice.
were talking about that. So
But and what I love about this in Star Wars and as we can all see it, we're all part of it, you know, and that's what's beautiful. It's not, it doesn't exclude anybody. Star Wars is all inclusive. You were saying, Margie, that this is the myth of our times, and I see it that way as well. You know, it's a the beauty about this is that it took George Lucas took this to a galaxy far, far away a long time ago, you know, but it took all the cultures of the world and projects them in these the different worlds, all these stories, and that's what's beautiful about Star Wars. It's a huge canon where you find everything, all myth in there, and you can extract all wisdom. I mean, just right now, just of analyzing one of the characters. I mean, such an important character as Luke Skywalker, but all the wisdom that we found and that we can apply to ourselves, you know, to that divine within that we have within us, you know, that really guides us. And what I like about this session is that, you know, we found that the hero starts being an ordinary person, and that the hero can make mistakes, but he can redeem himself as well. And in the end, you know, we saw Luke giving the all to save his friends. And in the end, what did he do? It was buy time for his friends to get saved, for his sister to get saved. So that's so noble and that's so beautiful. And that's, I think, where we're going to end this conversation. I really enjoyed it. We're going to probably have more. You know, this is just Luke Skywalker, and there's many other characters and many other topics. So I really enjoyed it. And if you did, we'll have you guys here. So Margie, thanks a lot for your participation. Ian, thanks a lot. Poncho, thanks a lot. Really appreciate you being here. Your knowledge was really, really good for this show. And thank all of you for being here, for participating, for lending us your ears. If you like this, like I always said, and only if you like it, like, subscribe, share, and do whatever you want to do with this information, but only if you like it. So thanks for participating. I am Santiago Kneeland. This is The Divine Within, the Invisible Connection with God. So thank you. See you later. Carpe diem and seize the day.